fantasy anime feels like it's in a bit of a modern renaissance. Frieren Beyond Journey's End is widely considered nothing short of a modern classic. Dungeon Meshi is one of the most subversively well-crafted worlds and casts in fiction, and Witch Hat Atelier's first season just finished airing to some serious acclaim, a real dark horse breakout hit to people that might have been sleeping on the manga. And what do these series and other 2026 fantasy standouts all have in common? Well, they're all written, or co-written in Frieren's case, by women. Listen, I don't think there's anything inherently valuable about what gender writes a story. I really don't. There's a full range of fantastic and awful stories written by any and all gender and identity. But I also think that since inception, mainstream fantasy and anime both historically have been a bit male-centric. And I don't think it's a coincidence that these women-helmed fantasy series feel so refreshing, striking similar chords, tackling universal themes, exploring complex emotions, and being more interested with subverting and deconstructing typical high fantasy tropes than playing them straight for the 100th time. On this channel, I've talked a lot about the fantastic female characters that make these shows work. I have videos on Marcel, Mau Mau, Coco, Agat, Fallon, Maki, she doesn't even go here, and I plan on making even more videos about these series casts because there's just so many fantastic characters and stories. Oh no, my steak too juicy and lobster too buttery. The women of these shows are written with such care and empathy that it's hard not to root for them, and they balance that emotional core with such chaotic goblin silliness that it's hard not to see why some of the most popular in these series are the girls. But I actually don't think the feminine touch of these creators ends at the women in the cast, because I don't think the most telling character writing of these women-helmed stories is the presentation of the female characters at all, but the men. The male characters of these series aren't what you typically define as masculine, and they're rarely even what you define as heroic. They're not typical anime characters or traditional fantasy tropes, or even any sort of Western action hero. There's something a little bit different, blurring genre conventions, but coming out on the other side with something that just feels natural for the stories and worlds they inhabit. And maybe most importantly is that there's a very tangible through line of kindness and empathy, where masculinity for these characters isn't just written as strong, as manly, but as compassionate, vulnerable, and sometimes deeply flawed. And today, I'd like to talk about it. I'm Dom, and this is how modern fantasy rewrites masculinity. Masculinity in fiction is something we understand before we even really know why we understand it. Superheroes and soldiers, impossibly muscled physiques, brooding bat suits, bald action heroes, dapper spies, smooth-talking rogues. Throughout all of pop culture, the mold of a male lead has been more or less the same for ages. I mean, that's why a guy that looks like this can be slotted into every male character in Hollywood blockbusters without anyone batting an eye. We just understand that this is what a hero is. This is what masculinity is. But like, is it though? Anime has always had a bit more nuance to their male leads, and honestly, I feel like maybe that's in part why it always resonated with me a bit more as a kid than the usual Western Saturday morning cartoons and superhero and action movies. Even going back to the earliest anime I'd watched, like Dragon Ball Z, Inuyasha, and Ghibli films, you had men that weren't afraid to be vulnerable, to be silly, to show emotion, to love deeply, to be disappointed when they had to resort to violence, incapable of talking a villain down from their impossible ledge. But despite that, I think the men in anime have kind of regressed lately. I don't really watch much isekai aside from revisiting the Unkslop of my youth. I love you, Digimon Tamers. So let me know if this is completely misinformed and I'll hold the L. But I think the perception of isekai's main characters is a big part of why it's such a maligned genre. In modern fantasy anime dominated by these isekai power fantasies, I feel like the male leads are factory assembled to be as bland and inoffensive as possible, but their goals and motivations fall far in that same camp of what I dislike about Hollywood masculinity. The heroes of these shows are looking for a way out of the video game, sure, but their goals are also undeniably masculine, negative, power, status, money, women. They want the highest rank, the biggest level, the hottest fake elf girlfriend. They probably don't have cars in the other world, but I'm sure if they did, they'd want the fastest one. Like, we're a single pivot away from an Andrew Tate video here. These Kirito clone-ass characters suck because there's nothing to them, aside from climbing the ladder of this video game hierarchy. Even down to the character design, they're supposed to blend in, to be so nondescript that it's someone you yourself could be. But if they're so blasé as to fit everyone, can they really, truly appeal to anyone? That's why today we're talking about my favorite depictions of masculinity from Frieren, Dungeon Meshi, and Witch Hat Atelier, covering where I think all of these shows do things differently and why their characters succeed where isekai and Hollywood tends to fail. Part 1. Frieren. Frieren's take on being a hero is something I find really fascinating. You can't go a single episode of Frieren Beyond Journey's End without hearing about Himmel the hero. Whether it's a flashback, a passing remark, a various state of polished statue, despite being long dead, Himmel is kind of omnipresent in Frieren. But after all, why shouldn't he be? He's the legendary hero who slayed the Demon King. But Frieren really isn't a story that's interested in all that. We've actually never even seen Himmel's confrontation with the Demon King, not through flashbacks, not as a memory, barely even recalled by characters. We don't even know what the death blow was, if there was one. We haven't seen the fight, and we barely understand what actually happened, because despite everything, that's not really the story Frieren is trying to tell. What we do see is Himmel's day-to-day life, how he helps ordinary people, how those small acts of kindness are actually the things people remember, not this ultimate pseudo-divine act of slaying a demon king in the far reaches of the world, but just how he was a good person in the moments he thought no one was watching. We've barely seen Himmel in the face of combat, and yet we've seen him spend a day looking for a lost cat. We've seen someone that had the foresight to commission statues of himself everywhere to greet his immortal friend, knowing she might one day want to see a familiar face. He even left his memoirs out for her to continue in a world and future he knew would someday not include him. Frieren gets a lot of praise for its female main characters. Frieren, Fern, Flamma, Serie, Ubel, and it's totally understandable why, but I think it writes men in a particularly interesting way. I don't think there's much that screams masculine about Himmel the hero. In fact, we learn he's kind of a diva, somewhat vain, and ultimately he's not the hero of legend at all, no matter how badly he may yearn for it. But he's also comfortable being the emotional anchor of this group, a compassionate, if not flawed person, just trying to make the world a better place when and where he can. And aside from Himmel, Stark is also just a fantastic male lead for Frieren's present party. At first glance, Stark seems like he's the cowardly character trope that we've seen 1,000 times over. But we learn that Stark is A, immensely powerful for being a human fighter, and B, just like a genuinely pretty good dude. And it becomes a joy to watch this young, scared kid gradually mature into, well, a hero. There's an emotional intuition to Stark's character that I really enjoy, not because he's particularly great at interpersonal dynamics, but because he recognizes his various shortcomings, and he tries. He strikes out on first dates, he says things that are unintentionally hurtful, and every day he walks the razor's edge of fumbling a baddie. Oh god, he's just like me for real. Frieren Season 2 had a lot of spotlight on Stark, and I think for good reason. We're at the point of Stark and Fern's lives that they're becoming adults right in front of us. Just like for our protagonist herself, it's easy to forget just how much time is passing in this show, and those years since the death of Himmel the hero just keep ticking upwards. Every montage where the group opts to pass a few months in a town, it's adding up. Seasons pass, then years. And what it means is we're seeing Stark become a man in real time. And that immaturity of Season 1 Stark is already beginning to fade a little bit, as Stark's decisions and morals and values are becoming more firm, more rooted in who he is. When asked to become the frontliner for other parties, he refuses because he knows where his real place is. When a demon attacks Fern, he doesn't even pick up his axe, he just puts that dude in a master lock. Unlike a lot of the cast of Frieren, Stark has never met Himmel. He only knows Himmel as a character in his master's stories, as a legend. But despite that, I feel like Stark is oddly one of the most Himmel-like characters in the entire show. Because being brave even in the face of fear, well, that's exactly what Himmel the hero would do. A late highlight for me personally is Stark's brief relationship with Genau. Just a fantastic bit of character writing in these few episodes. While it's never really stated, it doesn't have to be. Genau is suffering from survivor's guilt and kind of resigns himself to the fact that he wants to die as his partner did, defending the town on his own in futility. It really is like the masculine urge to die in a battle type thing. Genau believes himself to be an irredeemably bad person for letting his partner die, but Stark refuses this. Recognizing Genau's bravery, defends defending his home to the end is something he could never be capable of. And through this conversation, through their mutual understanding, and their fight with Revolta, the two come to realize that they aren't defined by what they believe about themselves, but by the actions they take. A bad person never would have saved a little girl out of instinct. A coward wouldn't take a direct hit for his comrade and stay fighting in battle. Someone that feels nothing towards people dying wouldn't give everything he had left to save someone's life. Part 2. Delicious in Dungeon. Dungeon Meshi's biggest strength is its ridiculous cast of characters. Despite the lived-in world building, the science meets cuisine approach to monsters, and the subtle politics of the world quietly unfolding before our eyes, the major appeal of the series is just this goofy lot of absolute weirdos, and none could be more apt for this video than Laios. Laios is such a great main character because he's such a bad main character. Okay, maybe bad is a little unfair, but I don't think anyone can deny that Laios is a little different from most fantasy heroes. I made an entire exploration of this topic in one of my earliest videos, but I think that Laios being a goofy little dork instead of a Jon Snow or an Aragorn is exactly what makes Dungeon Meshi such a good deconstructionist piece of character writing in fantasy. It's the secret sauce to making it feel less like a paint-by-numbers fantasy and feel genuinely alive, like you're watching a friend improv lines at a D&D table, or flubbing your entire playthrough with a crit fail in Baldur's Gate 3 when you haven't saved in ages and turned the autosave off because you enjoy a challenge. Well, guess what, buddy? You haven't saved in 7 hours of playtime. Back to Act 1, idiot. But underneath all that deep unseriousness, there is a heroism to Laios that I think we can all really respect. An archetypical masculine hero is a man that stands by his duty. There's a sort of stoic understanding and personal contract to responsibility. Do the right thing no matter the cost. With great power comes great responsibility type beat. And this whole heroic self-sacrifice thing is hero shit 101. Think of what I just said about Ganao. Think about how many times you've seen it in fiction. It's just what heroes do. Laios is so interesting both because he has no interest in that stuff whatsoever and because he's completely defined by it to the core of his being. In the last episode of the series, we finally get some Laios backstory, which in and of itself is such a neat bit of writing, like why save that till now? It's such a cool choice. But we get the reveal that Laios was, and technically is, a deserter. Totally unable to live a rigid and militaristic life he had no interest in, he leaves the army to do his own thing. And then in the Golden Country, where he's revealed to be something of a chosen one, again, he just doesn't seem thrilled with the idea. To bear this sort of heroic responsibility is something that Laios just doesn't want for himself. And that kind of writing, not a temporary and cliche denial of the hero's journey like you see all the time, but a deep rejection of even the idea of being a hero. I think that's why Laios strikes a chord with a lot of people. Nobody wants to sacrifice themselves for a cause they don't believe in. Nobody wants to fight on the front lines of someone else's battle. Through Laios, Dungeon Meshi's stance on being a chosen one is clear. You don't need to be a hero to do the right thing. You just have to be a regular guy that shows up and does it. The flip side of not wanting to be perceived as a hero is that Laios is undeniably a hero. He doesn't even think twice when his friends are in danger, and you actually couldn't point to a better example of masculinity as self-sacrifice than Laios 1v1ing nearly every monster in the entire dungeon to protect his friends and save his sister. Maybe the series' most hype moment so far is the Red Dragon fight, where Laios is literally prepared to sacrifice his life just at the off chance Fallon could still be alive somehow. Even Laios' blunt social awkwardness always has the eventual intention of just wanting to help his friends out of a dark place that maybe they didn't even recognize themselves in. Shuro, Senshi, Marcel, Izutsumi. Laios' dumb natural intuition at some point kind of helps them all when they're at their lowest. And it's not even just Laios. Ryoko Kui kind of writes all of her male characters with this blunt rejection of masculine heroism, and instead a more quiet focus on kindness, on nurturing. Senshi and Chilchuk both exemplify understated masculinity, both outwardly appearing gruff and standoffish, but secretly being total sweeties, who care deeply about the people around them. These two are just about the furthest thing from the archetypical masculine hero as it gets, and yet what could be more manly than cooking a meal for the whole squad, than shedding tears, showing emotion openly? What's more inherently masculine than providing for and protecting a younger generation? And speaking of that, Part 3, Witch Hat Atelier. Witch Hat Atelier's male lead Kifri is the instructor of the girls in the atelier. Think Gojo Kakashi, that brand of white-haired dude with covered eyes and a deep well of trauma that I'll just let you find out about for yourself. Kifri is an undeniable fan favorite at this point, see my last video. And again, I think Witch Hat's idea of masculinity is just something so out of the norm that it's really refreshing to see. The thing that really stands out about Kifri is just how much grace he's willing to give a complete beginner into the world of witches. In Witch Hat, magic is created through drawing, and it becomes this wondrous extended metaphor that the study of art itself is akin to magic. And through Kifri, we get this endlessly patient teacher who wants the best for his students, guiding them through the day-to-day minutiae as well as life-defining trials, a sort of hot anime Bob Ross. And if you've ever had a male mentor figure or role model, a teacher, a coach, family members with shared interests, anything, you know how completely life-changing it can be to have that kind of anchor in your life. And conversely, you can imagine how soul-crushingly terrible it can be to have someone in your life who's supposed to be teaching you, not believing in you. And these themes and motifs are things that early Witch Hat explores and in my opinion knocks out of the park. Kifri and Orogyo are master and watchful eye, choosing to raise apprentices after becoming accredited witches themselves. And while the whole scenario screams history will say they were roommates to me, there's just something about these two non-biological girl dads that just works. The heart of Witch Hat Atelier is these two and their relationship, and their dynamic towards parenting, not parenting these kids. But aside from being caring, Kifri is also undeniably cool, and we're supposed to be just as impressed by him and his obscenely powerful magic as the girls are, but we're also supposed to realize that he's not always right. There's a sort of uneasiness to Kifri as he tells the girls to only use magic to spread happiness, while clearly being conflicted about believing that kind of happiness is even possible. It's like the next generation realizing that the old ways aren't always right, but still being forced to abide by them, Kifri himself caught in the middle. Ah, God, finally some accurate millennial Gen Z representation in media. Kifri, Orogyo, and nearly the entire male cast of Witches, Not You, are such positive masculine figures, and they're great characters not just for their strength or talent or magical ability, but for their willingness to be gentle, goofy, patient, and selflessly supportive to the next generation of witches. Unless they're not. Nah, I'm just messing with you. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. If you'd like to support the channel, consider a like and a comment. Who's your favorite male character of these series, and why did they resonate with you? And if you'd really like to support the channel, consider checking out my Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member. On Patreon, I have my live reactions to Dungeon Meshi, Frieren, and Witch Hat Atelier, both reading and watching for the first time. So it really helps out the channel, and you get to see all of my first thoughts to everything that's happened in these series. A big thank you to my patrons and YouTube channel members, especially my biggest supporters like Lala Subs and Uraru. Anyway, my friends, that is all for this video. I've been Dom. This has been Men. And until next time.